Okay, this is the big one. In as much as I have built up a lot of anticipation to it, kind of maybe more than I meant to, but here we are. This will cover everything that I know about the Kickstarter, final bonuses, wrap it up, tie a little bow on it. Maybe set that bow on fire and watch it burn. If you want to support me, check out the Patreon. Patrons will get a lot of extras in this episode. My name is Ashley Clements, and these are the Look Back Diaries epilogues. Okay, so just to catch us all up, right before the last couple episodes of the Lizzie Bennet Diaries went up at the end of March 2013, a Kickstarter was launched to make a DVD set of all of those episodes. It asked for $60,000 in the video. In the video for it, Hank said that any extra funds would go to paying the cast and crew since they were underpaid for their work on the show. And then the Kickstarter went crazy. It did crazy numbers. It raised over $462,000, which is, more than $400,000 over what they asked for. But that did also mean that they had a lot more stuff to make, a lot more DVDs, a lot more posters. Very quickly, Bernie was kind of walking back the idea that all of the extra money would go to the cast and crew. And that led to some upset amongst the cast and crew who were asking for definitive numbers to be given to us about how much money we were going to get. Everyone initially got a bonus that was just however much money they had made during the Lizzie Bennet Diaries again, which did not in any way balance out the fact that people who joined later were paid more than the people who started at the beginning because there was more money available later in the show, or the fact that some people did an enormous amount of unpaid labor for the Lizzie Bennet Diaries. It didn't take any of those things into account. It was just however much money we had made again, which meant that bonuses, not including Bernie's, ranged from the highest being $73.50 and the lowest being $200, spread out amongst 27 people, and then $14,000 to Bernie. I was so bold as to ask Bernie how much money he thought that there would be left at the end, how much money I could expect to be coming my way. And at the time, he said he thought that I could expect a check for $20,000. We already know at this point that that did not happen. Got an email in October of 2013 that was very illuminating, and realized that the Kickstarter money had been spent on a lot of things that were very far outside the purview of the Kickstarter, and that was just very frustrating. And I put it out of my head, and I really didn't expect to get any more money, and I just let it go because I couldn't carry all the anger. I really did compartmentalize that pretty well because I did go back and film the bonus episodes and was not seething with rage. I really didn't think about it anymore because it was just very upsetting that there wasn't anything to be gained out of it. I just, it wasn't even necessarily like I was suppressing it. I just disassociated from it. I just kind of forgot about it. And that means that I also did not ever look at the final breakdown of how they publicly claimed that the Kickstarter money was spent. I didn't look at that until years later when some rage did bubble up because I knew that there were elements of it that were wrong. Now, I recently, as I mentioned in a previous episode, got an internal budget that I was not supposed to see. And that just makes the public pie chart even more egregious because it is full of falsehoods. Now, in thinking about how to talk about all of this, I've thought a lot about words because words matter and they have specific meanings. And I'm talking off the cuff, so I don't always say the right words. But I've been thinking about the difference between statements that are made that are not true and lies. And I think that intention and knowledge are important factors. If I say something that's untrue, but I believe it to be true, that's less malicious than if I say something that is untrue that I know is untrue. And this involves a mixture, things that are untrue and things that are bold faced lies. And I do want to give people the benefit of the doubt. I always want to give people the benefit of the doubt. Brene Brown speaks about the most generous assumption when someone does or says something that upsets you. What is the most generous interpretation? And I think that there is a lot of value in giving people the most generous assumption. And I also think that we have to be careful not to bend over backwards to excuse bad behavior. And I struggle with that line a lot. I often catch myself going, well, like, okay, but to like give them the benefit of the doubt, we think about like this from their perspective. And sometimes it's taken an outside eye to help me see that, yeah, no, this was just messed up. And that's kind of like the struggle of how do I be a good person? And I also, for a very long time, thought that being a good person meant I couldn't talk about any of this because I would be speaking negatively about some people. And I thought that it made me more professional not to do that. And I thought that people might not like me if I did that. And it also just felt like, what? I'm going to be this person like bringing up all this negativity. But all these years later, I know that I have only protected the guilty, first of all, and also that like these events have colored my view of a show that I still love. And I've been trapped with these complicated feelings because I felt like I had to keep them a secret. And I still meet people who love the Lizzie Bennet Diaries. And to be clear, I am in no way trying to make any of us love the Lizzie Bennet Diaries less. But the entire process of Look Back Diaries has really helped me focus on the parts of it that I loved. And you have helped me relive a lot of what made this show so special. But I also think that loving the Lizzie Bennet Diaries and honoring the memory of what it was means acknowledging all of that. And I don't want to hide anymore. To quote Elizabeth Gilbert, tell the truth, tell the truth, tell the truth. This is also, of course, my truth, my experience, and also like my memory of the experience, which, you know, I know I've forgotten some things. I was like actively trying to forget things about this. And so I do have like hard evidence because I got documents and emails and things, but I'm sure I don't remember everything. It'd be kind of freaky if I did, right? But so to give the benefit of the doubt, this is a lot of money. A lot of money got raised by people who were not used to having this much money. I have previously said, I think we all had like dollar signs in our eyeballs, like cartoon characters, that it was just this like, oh, kind of like, whoa, that's so much money experience. And also, no one on this team was equipped to do any of the things that this Kickstarter was for. That's not true because some of the Kickstarter money was to make Sanditon, and this was a team that had just successfully made a web series. So we know that they could do that. And through Hank's company, DFTBA, posters and t-shirts and merch had already been made and shipped. So like there were some elements of this that people had experience with, but producing a DVD, nobody had any experience doing, and simply like managing this much money nobody who was actively managing it had any experience with that. And that must have been very overwhelming. Like, I wouldn't have known what to do in their situation. I mean, I probably would have started by like hiring someone who did, but that's just me. Hindsight's 2020. What's insane is that they did hire someone to handle the DVDs, but it was someone who had never done it before, and they paid her very, very little money. But, when Bernie told me he thought I was gonna get $20,000, I think he thought that was true at the time. Like, I don't think he made up a number to lead me on. There really wouldn't have been any purpose to that. So I acknowledge that a lot of this did not go as planned. And I think a lot of challenges in making the DVD were unexpected. I really don't want to malign the DVD producer that they hired because she was lovely. Her name's Britt, but she had never done this before. Like, I don't understand how you hire someone to do a job because you don't know how to do it, and you hire someone who also doesn't know how to do it. It's not smart. Like, it's not smart. How do I say that in a nicer way? It's not smart. But maybe that's why Bernie felt safer early on, spending money on things that were very outside the purview of the Kickstarter, because he thought there was just going to be so much money. I mean, in summer of 2013, they were still predicting that the DVDs would be out by fall, and they were not out until summer 2014. So I fully acknowledge and empathize with the fact that they were in over their heads. And I don't know how long it took to get the numbers on what all of the merchandise was actually going to cost with all of the shipping and international shipping. And so that is me giving the most generous assumption. People were overwhelmed and ill prepared to handle this moment. And I can genuinely empathize with how stressful that might be. And now we're done giving the benefit of the doubt and making generous assumptions because we have evidence of what was actually done. Oh, that's right. Right before we got our final Kickstarter checks, Bernie emailed us all about getting people together for a casual happy hour in order to give people the DVDs. And I went, and I only have pictures of me at this event. Like, I took a picture with the DVD, but I do remember there just being like a lot of sour feelings. And I think that not everybody went to that, and that those of us who did kind of sat around talking smack about the people who'd invited us there. But we got our DVDs on June 11th, which is also the day that they posted these Kickstarter updates. And we went to the bar in Hollywood where we took the pictures at the end of LBD that were on Lizzie's Twitter. It's also the same bar where the LBD team hosted a party after the Streamies in 2013. We knew it well. I'm sure we were all buying our own drinks. Like, I'm sure this was just like meet at this bar, but I wanted that DVD in my hands, and this was the way to get it. 2 days later, Bernie sent an email letting us know that the checks for the rest of our bonuses had been mailed. He says there was a smaller total pool this time, but it was weighted toward the cast. He says we also released a summary of the entire campaign over at our Kickstarter page and linked to the update that we're about to look at. But at the time I did not, because I was done. So I had done all those things, gone to this party to get the DVDs, done the bonus episodes and the book without knowing what the final check would be. My final check, weighted towards the cast, was $2,500, $2,500. And like, that should be a nice check to get in the mail, but because of the history of everything and because of like what I had been led to believe I might get, I just remember being like, whatever. And, I mean, putting it in my bank account and being grateful for the money, but like, it just didn't feel good. It didn't feel exciting to get this like $2,500 bonus out of nowhere. Like, look, free money. It didn't feel free. I don't know what anyone else got. I don't know what being weighted towards the cast means. I was already, the like second highest bonus receiver. So I don't know what that means for other cast members who deserved a lot of money. This is from the Kickstarter, and it tells us here at the top $15,000 final cast crew bonuses, everyone but Bernie. We'll come back to that. But $2,500 is a sixth of that. So while I'm grateful to have received such a large piece of the pot, that doesn't bode well for everybody else. We know that, not including Bernie, 27 people got bonuses. If that were divided up evenly after my bonus, that would be an average of $480 per person, although I'm sure it was very different than that. I mean, my God, this whole thing has forced me to do math. I'm an actor. The inhumanity. But I'm actually pretty good at math, and better at it than people who were making the budget. Let's just say that. But I never thought about the Kickstarter after that. Like, it was just something that if people asked me about, like someone I knew, not like a fan or a journalist or something, but if someone I knew asked me about it, I would just say, oh yeah, we all got screwed. Which is like a weird attitude to have about something where, like, I did receive over $12,000 from the Kickstarter, but it was the expectations that were set up, and then also just like learning all the things that Kickstarter money went to that was very different than what we were initially told. And a lot of my outrage is on behalf of everybody else, because everybody else got less money than me. So it wasn't until years later that I went back and looked at this pie chart, and it made me mad because there were things in it that I knew weren't true. So, to start, this is like the review going over the whole thing at the end. And the DVDs have been shipped, a few problems. Also, like, can I just say how infuriating it is? Lizzie Bennet Diaries gifts got used in lots of things, but like for it to be used in something that is full of lies about underpaying the people that, like, it's just, I don't want my face on this, and I'm just, I don't have control over what people do with Lizzie Bennet Diaries gifts. This one's just particularly galling. Look, a little rehash. What was the goal of the Kickstarter? It was to produce the DVDs and Sanditon, and but then also, like, they talk a lot about, you can read this yourself if you want. Bernie talked a lot about how, like, they'd raised so much money, so they had to make the DVD bigger and better. And like, no, you didn't. Nobody was actually demanding that. And, benefit of the doubt, generous assumption. I understand feeling like you owe fans that when they've given you so much money, but there was no mandate that a bunch of things be taken on and added to the difficulty of making something that none of them had any idea how to make. That was a choice that was made, and responsibility for that choice should be taken appropriately. Now we get to how was the money used? Here's an approximate, it's very approximate overview of the Kickstarter budget. So I'm gonna go over this with what I could tell were falsehoods and lies just by looking at it at the time. And then I'll get into some information that I only recently learned that makes it even more of a lie. So they're rounding the total here to $462,000. They're telling us that 10% gets taken by Kickstarter and Amazon transaction costs. That's true. No debate here. $159,000 costs of manufacturing, packing, and shipping perk items. I have no quibble with that. I don't know anything about any of that stuff, so okay. $42,000 for DVD production. Not a lot of breakdown of, the differences here. I know more from the internal budget, but we're going with what I knew at the time. $51,000 for miscellaneous is just fucking egregious. Sorry. Like, that's a lot of miscellaneous. $74,300 for initial cast crew bonuses, not including Bernie. I had never asked anyone else what their bonus was. So when I did encounter this was the only knowledge that I had, and I knew that I had received about 10% of that. So I actually had to assume that people's bonuses were higher than they actually were, because we'll get to it. $14,700. Bernie Sue's bonus, $32,000. Total expense for Welcome to Sanditon. Again, no quibbles. That's the budget of that show. $28,000. Pemberley digital operating expenses. Okay. Somehow there were no operating expenses when the show was being produced, but okay. And $15,000 final cast crew bonuses, everyone but Bernie. Again, no information to contradict it. So what I did know at the time, because this then breaks this down a little bit more, miscellaneous cast crew expenses included: 1, compensating the team for DVD commentaries, interviews, voicemail messages, signed posters, etc. Okay, I knew that that happened. Sure. Now, those things were, of course, like part of fulfilling perks and making the DVDs, so I don't know why they're under miscellaneous, but things being in the wrong categories are at the bottom of my list of complaints about the budget. Production crew expenses such as makeup, wardrobe, set design, lighting. I have questions about that because I don't know what that's for. Like for the DVD interviews, we all did our own hair and makeup, and there was a backdrop behind us and there were lights. But like, so I think when they're talking about makeup and wardrobe, that is not included in the Sanditon budget, which would have its own makeup and wardrobe. They were basically talking about the Collins and Collins videos. It was just a place in the budget that I immediately recognized sounded like very normal, legitimate production expenses, but were not very much money to explain $51,000. So then here's where we get to my favorite part of this: residual payments to actors and writers from DVD sales. Because remember what I told you to put in your pocket? Hold on. Let me just finish this thing and then we'll get into that. Screen Actor Guild fees, that in this case would only apply to the Collins and Collins videos. So again, a very small fee. Award submission fees, that's actually expensive, submitting for Emmys and things. I mean, it's like a few $1,000s. It's not tens of thousands of dollars. And then, as I've already griped about, a slush fund for cast and crew attending VidCon, LeakyCon, the Emmys, etc. Of course, we weren't told when we were doing those things and receiving those things that that's where the money was coming from. But I want to talk about those residuals. And this, is also kind of like related to the writer's strike currently. So I think the concept of residuals is maybe kind of weird to people who work like normal salaried jobs. Residuals in the entertainment industry are based on exhibition, meaning that the people who have residuals built into their contracts, like actors and writers, receive residual payments for content continuing to be exhibited. A friend of mine put it this way, and I like it. He said that residuals are actually favors to the studios because they don't have to make an entirely new piece of content. They're allowed to show an older piece of content. They pay residuals, which are a fraction of what it cost to make the show or movie in the first place, and are a lot less expensive than having to make an entirely new product. So if you look at it that way, residuals are a way for studios to save money. But another way to look at it is that if the content is being exhibited, it is for profit. And if anyone's going to profit off of it, that some of that goes to the people who helped make it. So when ABC airs a rerun of Grey's Anatomy, everyone who was in that episode of Grey's Anatomy gets paid for it to air again. And a big part of the Writers Guild strike is about the lack of residuals in streaming, because when streaming was new, they were on all these little kind of new media contracts that they intentionally used to skirt residuals. And that is true of the Lizzie Bennet Diaries. The Lizzie Bennet Diaries was done under the new media contract that was current in 2012, which does not stipulate that any residuals are owed, and thus we never got a dime for Lizzie Bennet racking up millions of views. But because of protections that entertainment unions have fought for in years past, because of previous strikes, residuals are owed for home video, and that started with VHS, DVDs, Blu-rays. If you want to make this content into a DVD, then you owe the union members, this was a SAG show, this was a WGA show, you owe the members residuals per their union contracts, which they obviously knew because they've mentioned it many times. Now, here's the part. I don't think it's going to be that shocking to you after all this buildup, but here's the little mind-blowing part. We didn't get residuals for the DVDs. They didn't pay them. Like, they knew that they owed them. They put them in a budget. They told the public that they paid them, but they did not. But I had put all of this out of my mind, and I wasn't expecting any more money. And like, I completely forgot, because if any of us had remembered, all it would take was filing a complaint with SAG, and we'll get there. But none of us did. The writers got residuals, so I don't know if that's just because, that's the union that Bernie's a member of, but the actors didn't. So that I feel pretty comfortable calling a lie. Back to this explanation of the money, the talk about first round bonuses. This arrangement favored those who worked more hours, except not, because we worked so many unpaid hours. And this also says that, like, aside from the main stars, the writers and crew tended to receive higher bonuses than the actors. A lot of the writers and crew, I now know, received higher bonuses than Mary Kate, Laura, and Julia. So that's also not true. Bernie's bonus covered 12 months of, blah, blah, blah. The money from Welcome to Sanditon was spent largely on paychecks for people like Allison Page, Daniel Vincent Gord, Margaret Dunlap, Jay Bushman and Jenny Powell, Alexander Edwards, and other LBD production crew. Series was initially budgeted for $17,000, but ended up at $32,000. Like, there's got to be a better way to say that. We made a conscious decision to spend more money on it. Like, I mean, it's semantics. I don't even know that Bernie wrote this. I actually have been told that he didn't, but he did sign off on it. Also, like, how disingenuous to put Hank's name first. Like, I don't think that Hank was involved in any of the minutia of this. Like, Hank has a lot of companies. He put somebody else in charge of Pemberley Digital. The Pemberley Digital operating expenses included paychecks for one full-time administrative assistant, one part-time DVD producer, and one summer intern, all of whom spent a large chunk of their time handling the Kickstarter project. I had no evidence to the contrary until I got the internal budget. What else does it say? These employees stopped receiving paychecks from the Kickstarter fund in August 2013 when funding streams came in from DECA, the Secret Diary of Lizzie Bennet book deal, and LBD advertising. That should say ad revenue, because advertising is something a company spends money on. I think they must mean the YouTube ad revenue from the ads playing on the Lizzie Bennet Diaries channel. And per one of Bernie's emails in the past, that was when the Lizzie Bennet Diaries had fully recouped its initial $150,000 budget and was just profit at that point. And without having seen the internal budget, I don't begrudge them having to hire someone. It also still, that, like, again, the person hired to produce the DVD, that's part of the DVD production budget. That's not part of the administrative, but also, like, these numbers are all fake relative to the internal budget. But I didn't know that at the time. I just knew that the administrative assistant had handled a lot of, like, Bernie's scheduling and things like that, which just kind of begs the question of, like, what was the plan if you hadn't raised that much money? So the idea that money was, fiercely protected for bonuses doesn't line up with what they say, and some of what they say didn't line up with things I knew were true, like residual payments that we did eventually. We will get there. receive. Like, we will get there not even in this episode. Because first of all, there's enough to cover in this episode, and also because it was so many years later. So many years later. You'll be so shocked. I'm going to save most of the internal budget revelations for patrons, which is where I put all the most salacious stuff. But let's just go over a few of the most egregious lies. So the internal budget says that the total amount of cast and crew bonuses was $89,425. Now, if you add up these two numbers, that's just a stray $125 missing. So maybe that was a rounding error. I don't know. But unlike the 75-ish thousand dollars of the initial cast and crew bonuses, there's no breakdown of the $15,000. So while I was able to see what the initial cast and crew bonuses were, I have no idea what the final cast and crew bonuses were because there's no evidence of it anywhere. What is very clearly spelled out in the internal budget is that Bernie got a $14,000 bonus that is included in the $74,000 here. Now, that's important for a few reasons. One, because now we know that out of this public budget that there are at least $14,700 that are actually unaccounted for because Bernie's bonus was counted twice. Where did that money go? We don't know. It also gave the impression that the cast and crew received much higher bonuses because, in fact, everyone but Bernie was splitting $60,000 here, not $74,000. That's what we call a lie. On both this pie chart and the internal budget, there are people paid out of different pots, which just is just kind of like a lot of fuckery, maybe is a good word for it. Like, it just makes it very difficult to actually assess. So like the administrative assistant was paid out of this $28,000, but she was also paid out of this $51,000 bucket. So there was some differentiation internally of the kinds of work that she was doing. Also, like, I don't know why this thing very clearly says that the Kickstarter paid for one intern when the internal budget tells me it paid for three. And like, those are legitimate expenses. You can say you need to pay people to make the DVDs. Some of the lies just don't even make sense. Like, what are you doing? Likewise, people working on DVD production were paid out of the $42,000 and the $51,000. To be clear, the $42,000 DVD production was to like assemble everything, not to print the DVDs. Printing the DVDs is included in the $159,000 for manufacturing costs per a totally itemized internal budget. That does seem to be legitimate. The $42,000 did clearly balloon in some ways because of incompetence. Like, they actually, this is in one of the Kickstarter updates, I'm going full screen for this, they had to re-edit the entire series because they lost the original episodes. I mean, like, first of all, that's something you should check to see if you have before you launch a Kickstarter to make the DVDs. But also, like, what are you talking about? You lost them? You lost them? Like, I think what is genuinely much more likely is that to save hard drive space, once the episodes were uploaded to YouTube, they were deleted. Like, that makes much more sense than losing them. Here's my experience producing low budget content. When you make the content that you have poured your heart and soul and your very few dollars that you've spread thin to make the thing, you take that on your little SD card and you copy that to 2 hard drives at least. 2 hard drives. And that is what they were doing during production of the Lizzie Bennet Diaries. They would copy a card to 2 hard drives and at the beginning mail one of them to Montana for Hank or Michael to edit and keep one in case something happened to the one in transit. So like, they knew this at some level, but clearly didn't have the same attitude about the finished episodes. And that may have started from the very beginning when Hank was our editor, because think about how many Vlogbrothers videos there are, right? Like, I think that that would be understandably a part of his normal workflow. And it never would have been a problem if they didn't try to make DVDs later. But that is why some of the episodes on the DVDs don't match what's online because they had to be re-edited from scratch, and they paid editors thousands of dollars to do that. Like that's incompetence, but also okay, legitimate expense. Somebody does need to be paid to do this. And I guess the last thing I'll leave in the public version is that the numbers don't even add up in the internal budget. Like the level of incompetence, the failure at basic math skills. I don't know who the intended audience was for the budget. It seems like it's to present to DECA because it also includes the separate Emma approved budget and seemed to be asking for more money. So I guess maybe they needed to like show how they'd spent all the money that they had. But like the number one rule in cooking the books is just make the numbers add up. Like if you're just making up something in a budget, make the numbers add up. They don't. And there are numbers that like just seem to be pulled out of thin air. And it is just an embarrassing document to be used in any business capacity. I would be embarrassed to turn it in like a budget homework assignment in middle school, because by middle school, one must have a grasp of addition and subtraction and know that these numbers don't add up. But per their own internal budget, they present that there are $4,710 in surplus, which makes no sense, right? There should be $0 in surplus if all of the extra money was given as bonuses, right? Like, shouldn't that additional $4,700 be split amongst the cast and crew? There should be zero surplus for something where all the extra money is going to the cast and crew. But because so many numbers are made up, the amount of money that's actually accounted for, there are actually more like $30,000 to $60,000 that are not accounted for in the internal budget. There are a lot of places in the budget where they just add like 10% contingency, but a 10% contingency added to a budget should mean that they're prepared for unexpected costs, but that if that money is not then accounted for in the hard costs, it's extra. But instead, those contingency fees are just sort of included without any hard costs to support what they were spent on in most cases, as just like that was what that cost. And I have no idea what that money was actually spent on, who actually received it. The crazy thing about it too is that like it could have been completely legitimate to pay Bernie and Jenny and other people that they hired to handle all of the work that fulfilling the Kickstarter perks created. But that's not what's represented, which means that there are tens of thousands of dollars that are just unaccounted for. And I won't even hazard a guess at where that money went. What I do know is that we were lied to. The cast and crew, we were misled, maybe unintentionally, but ultimately lied to. And so was everyone who contributed to the Kickstarter, because this pie chart is a lie. And maybe the best benefit of sharing it publicly is that I'm not mad anymore. I thought I would be like tearing my hair out with rage as I went through this with you all, and instead I feel lighter. It's not my secret to carry anymore. Coming up, I promised even more shocking revelations, and that is because we have to cover what happened with those DVD residuals when the Lizzie Bennet Diaries was put on TV, and what happened with my screenplay. And then after that, I think I'm finally done recounting all of the LBD things in my life.